Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Buildable Backyard Summit. I'm Rodney Harrell. I'm Vice President of Family, Home, and Community at AARP. I want to welcome you on behalf of the entire AARP team. Now, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members, we strengthen communities and advocate for what matters most to families: health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. I'm honored to lead ARP's housing strategy work and excited that this conference is bringing together discussions of ADUs as a key solution in addressing our nation's housing challenges, a solution for people of all ages. Now, why is AARP interested in this space? Well, first, our organizational roots are in housing. Back in my office, I have a photo of our founder, Ethel Percy Andrus, showing President Eisenhower a model of Freedom House, a home built with what we now call universal design features. The story of our founding actually begins with her finding one of her colleagues, a retired teacher, suffering from inadequate housing in Depression-era Southern California. In fact, that retired teacher was living in a chicken coop. Our housing challenges as a nation are not new. Speaking of California, today that's one of the states that passed statewide legislation removing barriers and making it easier to build ADUs in order to help address longstanding affordability issues. And across the country in North Carolina, the home of our virtual summit, Raleigh passed ADU legislation to make it easier at the local level last year. And speaking of North Carolina, I'm also excited to hear about the $50 million affordable housing and transportation bond in New Hanover County. And while ADUs are part of the solution for affordability, it's a reminder that we do need new approaches as well. And I want to congratulate my colleagues at AARP, North Carolina, and others who push for these and other housing options. But let me step back for a second to the national level. I've mentioned affordability, but that's not all that ADUs are about. When I came to AARP in 2008, it was rare to hear civic leaders think about housing an aging population at all. That's changed, and I think I know why. First, the Census Bureau estimates that 2034 will be the first time that people over the age of 65 will outnumber those under 18. And that's a fundamental shift in US history. What it means is that communities can't afford to ignore the needs of people across the age range any longer. Meanwhile, COVID has killed more than 184,000 people in nursing homes, according to our nursing home dashboard. And that has spurred many families to think about their housing needs to support older relatives and others. We know that the vast majority of older adults want to stay in their homes as they age, nearly 8 to 10 of those 50 and older. But a lack of housing options is a challenge. We need affordable, accessible housing. And if we don't have that, it prevents people from leaving long-term care facilities and finding the options they need to stay in the communities of their choice. At the end of the day, we need more options to address our housing needs, and I'm a fan of ADUs to help that. They provide an option that can fit within existing communities in the locations where people live, and they can create affordable options for those who need them, including those who have been prevented from living in communities of their choice in past due to zoning or other barriers. And they also empower homeowners to have the flexibility with their properties to do what works best for their families. America needs more housing options, and addressing financing and other barriers that will help create more ADUs is one way to get us there. At ARP, we think of ourselves as everyday innovators in aging. We're now looking at trying to incorporate ADU policies into our world famous livability index. And our recent state model act and local ordinance on ADUs is being used in communities all over the country. So those are two ways we're innovating, and you can see more at aarp.org/ADUs. But I want to thank our panelists and all of you for also being innovators in the space. And I look forward to today's conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harrell, and to ARP and all of our sponsors for Buildable Backyards. We really do appreciate your support. We also appreciate the support of all of our speakers yesterday and also today. Everyone is volunteering their time and expertise so that we can achieve more inclusive communities nationwide. So we thank you for that. Before we get into today's session, I just wanted to let you know we have a couple of announcements. One is our last session today has been canceled, but we do have some replacements. If you would like to network with other folks who are attendees, you can do that within the Whova app. So one of those networking sessions is scheduled for 3:40. I invite you all to come. I'll be there. I would love to be able to interact with you. I know we have this webinar format for the sessions, but please join us at 3:40. And some of you have been very active on our leaderboard. And so we have 2 winners for our contest. Tank Steiner will be receiving Backdoor Revolution, a guide, an ADU book guide by Cole Peterson, and Joe Ellen Mason will be receiving a course called ADU Primer, and that course is offered by Earth Advantage. It's their first step in becoming an ADU specialist. So congratulations, Tank and Joe Ellen, for being super active on Whova and winning some things. We also have a photo contest going on until 7 o'clock tonight. So if you would like to be in the running to win something, please post that photo. And if the photo that gets the most likes will win something. I don't know exactly what it is yet. It might be one of those 2 things or something else different. It's going to be a surprise. But that's all we have as far as announcements goes. I'm going to start sharing my screen and we can everyone see that? We're going to start with today's sessions. All right. Again, thank you for joining us. Our first session today is the opportunity of place, shared equity, and ADUs. On our panel today is Nicole Beckstrand. She is the founder and CEO of Yard Homes Minnesota. Stacy Horowitz, the operations director for City of Lakes Community Land Trust, and myself, Sherry Taylor, asset manager for Durham Community Land Trustees. So I'm going to tell you, yesterday you learned a little bit about who DCLT serves, who we are. We've been around since 1987, but I just want to go back really quickly and go over the basics of community land trusts. And in a second, you're going to see a poll pop up. And I would like to know how many of you are really comfortable and know a lot about community land trusts. Are you an expert or are you just a novice? Please let us know in the poll so that we can get through this presentation. And I know that you all know the basics of CLTs. Really quickly, there's over 140 community land trusts in the nation right now, and then another 250 worldwide. This gives us a really large opportunity to serve our communities and serve our communities through ADU development. The first community land trust is actually a land trust that focused on tenant farmer rights in Albany, Georgia. If you don't know anything about new communities, I suggest you look it up. It's an amazing story and one that is very inspiring to us even now. So what are CLTs? CLTs are nonprofit organizations that really focus on land as a community resource. They can be urban, rural, suburban, but they all serve people of low and moderate incomes. This is important because CLTs can really hold all property types, from commercial, farmland, residential, shopping centers. CLTs can really be stewards of any type of property. But what's really important is that it's community-led development. So the classic CLT model, that nonprofit board is 1/3 CLT residents, 1/3 neighborhood residents, and then 1/3 open to the general public. So that's the composition of most CLT's boards. What's really important is that we focus on permanent affordability. So there's not a sunset on or a period of affordability for any of our properties. And that's something that's really important as communities across the nation are facing rising housing costs, and real estate prices are outpacing incomes. That permanent affordability makes sure that our communities stay diverse, not only racially, but also economically.
Sherry, we cannot see your presentation.
Okay, that is, I am so sorry. Let me try this again. Technical difficulties. I apologize. Okay. How about now, Sydney?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. This was the map you were supposed to see a few minutes ago, just showing the range of CLTs in the US. As I said, all different types of property can be held in a CLT. And I think I was on this slide, but all types of CLTs are different, but one thing that we have in common is that we are all focused on stewardship of land. And so that stewardship could be for different reasons. In the cases of New Community, it was land reform, but also anti-displacement, anti-gentrification, economic justice, and all the different reasons you see here on the right. I'm really excited about sustainable development as well. But those anti-displacement measures are really important because we know who's most vulnerable to displacement as communities change and gentrify. So this is the opportunity that we have with community land trusts. It's something called shared equity. And it's where the home buyer buys the structure, but the community land trust retains ownership of the land. And this is really important for permanent affordability because the home buyer will buy the home below market value. And that's to keep the home affordable. And upon resale, they share the equity or appreciation in their home with the future buyer. This really allows community land trusts to remove some properties out of the traditional real estate market and have them as a community resource. The restriction on sale means that the home is going to be a certain price, but it's always going to be affordable to someone who is 80% area median income or below. This is the opportunity that we have with community land trusts. And here are just some resources if you are interested in learning more about CLTs in the US or nationally. These links right here will show you, will give you a great primer into what we're all about, how CLTs can be formed. So I just wanted to give that short primer because it's important to understand how we operate, because we have embarked, Durham Community Land Trustees, on a pilot project called CLT +1, a backyard solution for affordable housing. In September of 2020, we received an innovation grant from NeighborWorks America to figure out how to pair a land trust home and ADU in one sale. So the goal of CLT plus one is to increase the amount of affordable housing, permanently affordable housing, and really combat rising prices, real estate prices. CLT plus one is a 2-for-1. We have a homeowner, a home sale, and a rental on the same property. This is, we want to innovate the community land trust model of home ownership. I explained a little bit about what that was a few minutes ago, but we think by adding an ADU, we can increase the purchasing power of home buyers in really competitive markets, while also adding units in a way that is gentle to the neighborhood and respectful. This is really great for us who focus on urban infill, because lots of those properties and parcels are small. And so this is a way to add units to areas that you can't fit a large multi-unit property. In Durham, we were recently allowed to add ADUs. Our Unified Development Ordinance was updated in 2019, so we can have ADUs up to 800 square feet. And of course, a lot of that is dependent on your lot size and dimensions, but the fact that we can actually do this right now is important. DCLT, we have both land trust homeowners on their properties. We also have rental properties, and then we also have our CLT plus one parcels. How we're going to innovate this is that these homes are going to be sold, but somewhat different from our traditional land trust homes. DCLT will continue to manage the ADU rental unit, because we want to provide that wraparound support for our homeowners. We don't want folks to become first-time homeowners and first-time landlords on closing day. So we want to provide that support. That support will also reduce risks for us as an organization and also for lenders. But the homeowner will own the ADU. Now, I have to say that as part of this pilot year, we have not yet figured out our entire program. That is one of the reasons why we hosted Buildable Backyards, to learn from our colleagues, to really inform what we're going to do next. But we do also want to incorporate landlord training for our home buyers. We think that's really important. And we're also going to revise our ground lease agreement to make sure that it reflects all of the changes and the ADU addition. So these are our opportunities. As I said, we can design a new single family home and new ADU. That'll be the CLT plus one. DCLT also owns quite a number of scattered site properties, mainly single family homes and duplexes. So we have the opportunity to place ADUs behind those. And then we can offer this also to our current CLT, our current land trust homeowners, who also have the opportunity to put an ADU behind their home. So we have done some preliminary mapping analysis of parcels that are most likely great candidates for an ADU. We're not finished with that analysis yet, but this map shows that the parcels that have the darkest green have the most lands left with them. This was not a parcel by parcel mapping exercise. That'll come next, but we can see that even in this small area, and this is not all of DCLT's holdings, but even in this small area, that we have a lot of potential there to add ADUs. So as I said, we're still in our pilot year. We're going to be designing the program even more after what we learned in these 2 days. We're going to be looking for partners. Site selection has already started, obviously with property that we already own. And we're in our pre-development fundraising phase. We need to do pre-development fundraising so we can do our pre-development activities. Not all of our parcels are in various shapes. We need to do some demolition, some architecture, and some engineering. And so being able to get through that pre-development phase is going to be crucial for the next year where we start construction of our CLT+1 homes. I did want to tell you about our fundraiser, our pre-development fundraiser. That's up now, and we really need your help on trying to break ground for our CLT+1 project. And so I invite all of you to check out that fundraiser. If you have any questions for me about this pilot that we don't get to today, here's my contact information, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Now I'm going to hand it off to Stacy of City of Lakes CLT.
Thank you, Sherry, and welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get things started. And I am hopeful that everyone can see the screen and should be seeing a PowerPoint presentation. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity to share a bit of our story on the accessory dwelling units that we've been able to build in the last few years. As I believe Sherry mentioned, my name is Stacy Horowitz. I'm with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been with the organization going on 16 years, and I'm currently the operations director. However, majority of my time over the last decade and a half has been focused on property development through our buyer initiated program, as well as some of the developments that we've done ourselves starting around 2013, 2014. So just to give you a bit of context, the City of Lakes Community Land Trust was started in 2002, and we serve only the city of Minneapolis. Currently, we have 8 full-time equivalent staff, and we have 330 plus homes in the trust, as well as having served a total of about 430 households. So to date, we've had 100 resales, and we use a 25% appraisal-based formula. In addition to our kind of the usual community land trust activities, we also have a realty subsidiary, and about 2 years launched a commercial CLT initiative, which is still in progress. Excuse me. Within our portfolio of homes, we have single family homes, condos, townhomes, and duplexes. And what we'll be talking about today, which is what we refer to as our multi-generational homes. And I'll tell you a bit of a backstory as we go through the conversation today. The homes that we've acquired have been through our own developments, but for about the first 10 years or so, the Land Trust, the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, actually acquired most of its properties through their buy initiated program, as well as developer partnerships. And so there's been a lot of different paths through which homes have come into the City of Lakes Community Land Trust. So in regards to our ADUs, I really wanted to start out as to why. In 2013, 2014, the City of Lakes was really still not doing a whole lot of its own development, where we actually stepped into title on a vacant lot or a vacant home. The city of Minneapolis had a new initiative around that time, starting, I would say maybe 2011, 2012, around infill new construction. And we really weren't thinking about new construction at the time, but the city was encouraging us to participate in this particular initiative. And we decided at the time that if we were going to start doing new construction, we really wanted to think through what kind of housing type was not available or wasn't as readily available, I should say, within the city, and also what maybe wasn't being developed by other developers. At the same time, an architect that we had worked with quite a bit had been doing quite a bit of research on ADUs and was very interested in the concept and how we could incorporate them into perhaps some of the land trust work. So we decided to create a product called a multi-generational home. And the reason we called it a multi-generational home is at the time, the city was not allowing duplexes and did not have an ADU kind of zoning or policy around that. And so we called it a multi-generational single family home so that we could try to get it through plan review. Needless to say, we encountered a few challenges with that because it kept being pushed back saying it was a duplex, and we kept challenging saying it was a multi-generational single family home. And the other reason that we really looked at this was through our buyer initiated program, we'd had quite a few people inquiring about multi-generational living and wanted to know if we did duplexes and looking at duplexes as a solution for multi-generational living. And that's also part of the reason we added duplexes as an option through our buyer initiated program. So the first ADUs that we built, we started the process with the city in about late 2013, 2014. It took us about 4 months to identify a lot that the city would allow us to build the design that we had in mind. And we were really focused on building one home that had an accessory dwelling unit attached to it. We ended up with a lot that the city asked if we could build 2. So we started down the process. We continued to have some challenges with planning and zoning. And where we landed when we first started construction on the first two ADUs was that we had to remove a second front door entrance, and we could not have a stovetop in the kitchenette, because otherwise it would be a duplex, and it was just too costly for us to build a duplex at the time with all the requirements. So we finally got the lot, we finally got our plan approved, and we decided to move forward. And at the time, when the city finally started to kind of look at the ADU option, this is where they landed, was that we have an internal, and that's not really what we were looking at the time. Ours was more focused, the original design was on the second one here that had the attached ADU to the back of a single family residence. And then also within our city, we also have a detached option as well. But this came after we had started the process. So during construction, we actually had to, the city came up with more of a policy around accessory dwelling units. And there was a particular document that had to be signed because the city was also within that requirement wanting the ADU to be an owner occupied. So at least one of the units had to be owner occupied at all times. And that fit really well with our land trust because we do require owner occupancy. So we were already okay with that, but it was really kind of a learning process for ourselves as well as the city when we did these first ones in around the 2013, 2014 timeframe. So I wanted to share a picture of the final product. So the lower picture you will see is this main house is a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. And then the accessory dwelling unit is more on attached to the back. And the other thing we could not have is we could not have locked doors on the interior between the 2 units. So we figured that in the future, a homeowner could do whatever they wanted to do. We just needed to satisfy what the city's requirement was. So we also ended up with so the second unit, you can kind of see the gray building behind. In both of these first 2 units, we just did more of like a French door type of thing between the 2 units and figured the homeowners could manage that in the future. So in our design, in all 4 of the ADUs that we've done to date is a similar design where it's the single family home and then there's an attached unit on the back. These 2 homes in particular, we were able to achieve a no-step entrance in the back. So again, trying to support aging in place and also thinking about who might be in the ADU. All of the ADUs have the wider doorways, and we also have blocking for bars in the future. And then in the kitchenette, we were also mindful to make sure that there was space like underneath counters and stuff for wheelchairs and or walkers if anyone living in the ADU needed that kind of assistance. I know this is a little, it looks a little chaotic, but I wanted to just kind of give you a sense of what the floor plan looked like. And I think in particular, so this is kind of the main, oops, sorry, that was accidentally clicked. this is kind of the main area to the right here, closest to where it says City of Minneapolis approved. Within the ADUs, we have a shared washer and dryer laundry area. And we also had to make sure that both units could have access to electrical panels and heating. And this was something, and I'll talk about lessons learned, is really understanding what a city may require in relation to state building codes and the interpretation of those. We learned a lot in the process of making sure that those aligned and being able to understand what may have been required and what may not be very clear on a state level, and then what the city may be interpreting for their own purposes and their own zoning and code requirements. So to understand those two and to be very familiar with both was very important in helping these projects be successful. And so on the first floor, and the single family home is a 2-story. So there is the main living area, and then we have the kitchen for the main unit. And then on the second story, it's the 3 bedrooms and the full bath. And then downstairs, it's a half bath. And there is separate entrances to the ADU. There is more of a kind of a kitchenette area you can see here, as well as a shared living. So it's more of an open concept. And in this particular property, there is a side porch that goes out from the living room. And then the full bath and the bedroom on the 4th floor, or excuse me, on the 1st floor. So interestingly enough, depending on the family or who is the owner, individuals and people kind of going through really saw that it could either be the separate living if you had a parent, or we also have a number of families that have adult children with special needs, to have some kind of separation and yet still be close enough if there was caretaking going on or a need for caretaking. And so that's really what was very attractive to buyers about the accessory dwelling unit in our case. The other piece was that the other option in this particular design was that you could also open it up and make just one large single family home and end up with a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath home. So there was an option when the ADU was attached, depending on a particular household's needs. And I thought it may be helpful to just share some of the cost information and over time. So the first ones we built in 2014, and the last one we just wrapped up towards the middle end of 2019. And the other thing we learned from the original first 2 to the second 2 that we did, you'll see here, is we reduced the square footage of about 300 square feet. We just needed to really figure out how to build them. We were trying to a bit more cost effectively, and you'll just see that it just continued. The cost kind of went up. So construction cost over time, increased by about $20,000 or $30,000. A bit of a caveat for 1505 is the fact that there was, you'll see this total development cost seems pretty substantial, at least for our market. In both 1505, we had a huge soil correction issue, and in the 4000, we demoed an existing home with neighborhood support for that demolition and removal of that home. So there were some unusual costs in both 1505 and the 4000 property. The market value for the first 2 we built, since they were side by side, the market value, the land trust price, very similar. The interesting thing about 1505 and 4000 is that it's the exact same designed house in just 2 different neighborhoods within Minneapolis. So I thought it also showed, depending on where you choose to build, you can see can be substantial difference between the market value just based on the other surrounding home prices in the area. And the 229 is one of the highest homes that we've ever sold at a land trust price. That's I think one of our highest, if not the highest. And so it was tough for us to list it at the 229, but we also realized that we were listing 1.5 units essentially of housing. So felt a little bit better, but that was a stretch for us. So who purchased our homes? The homes that were purchased included household size ranging from 1 to 4 people. And we get questioned a lot as to why a single family home with an accessory dwelling unit to a one-person household? But in that case, the buyer was really purchasing in a strategic way, in the fact that she had anticipated and was anticipating at the time that either her grandmother or mother may need to transition to new housing in 2 to 3 years, and wanted to make sure that she had a place for them to transition to. The average AMI for the households that purchased is just over 60% for our area median income. And of the 4 properties that we've done with ADUs, 2 are owned and occupied by BIPOC households, and 2 are multi-generational households. So at the time that they were purchased, there was 2 generations that were planning to live in the home, and still do. So the key lessons learned, we learned that this is a really an attractive housing type for families, especially those interested in multi-generational living. I do think there is a growing interest among our homeowners for an opportunity to do a rental unit, similar to what Sherry was sharing about the CLT+1 initiative in Durham. And we also learned that they can be pretty costly to build. When you think about it, you're really building 1.5 units, especially if it's one building. But we're also finding in trying to add to a garage or add a separate unit, I think can also be fairly challenging, especially for our existing households. So we continue to have conversation, trying to figure out how to support. We've had one homeowner who actually reached out to build a Pilates studio, because the commercial cost for leasing was getting way too much for her. And in the course of the conversation, she actually designed it so it fits her needs currently for Pilates, but in the future, if she sells the home, it meets all the requirements for an ADU. So it could easily be a new homeowner could use it as an ADU. And that's attached to the house. So that is also another situation where there's been an addition to the home. We have also figured out, because of the cost involved, that can be a lot of affordability and development gap needed. These are some of our highest investments in affordability and gap, as well as development gap. And I mentioned earlier on the importance to understand how well local code requirements align with state codes, because that did add some cost as we had to shift some of the initial design to make both parties happy. The other thing I didn't note on here is also the importance of partnerships. Really, we could not have achieved this early on, when the city could have simply said, land trust, you're trying to build a duplex, you either need to build it as a duplex or, move on. And through a lot of conversation, we were able to kind of push this idea forward of the accessory dwelling units, when there really wasn't a formal accessory dwelling unit policy for the city. And so it was through that partnership that we could actually do a new type of housing type within the city, and really move something forward in a larger conversation, where we now have the ADU policy within the city. And it's shifted over the last couple of years, but we now have that in place, and I think is affording a lot of opportunity for more density, as well as just new options for different homeowners for rental, all of those pieces. The county was another significant partner in the fact that the home that we demolished for $4,000 was a tax forfeited home. And so through the partnership with county and city, we were able to acquire that property, demolish it, and build a new home. And of course, we couldn't do any of this without our funders. So that's always a long-term partnership that we need to appreciate and value, which we have over time. And I just wanted to bring a bit of an update for our current city policy and zoning. So one of the things that has changed is that the owner occupancy requirement for ADUs for the detached or the attached has been removed. The impact that has for us is that our multifamily or multi-generational design would now be considered full dwelling units, and we would be required to do the fire separation and separate mechanicals, which is only going to add to the cost of being able to build a unit. So we have a project in place right now that we have a variance on that is going to, I think, good for about another 1.5 years. So it's going to be essentially grandfathered in under the old requirement. We won't have to do the fire separation or separate mechanicals, but if we're not able to get funding to do that in the time and get it constructed, we would have to shift and probably add a fairly substantial amount to the cost to build. And then generally in our community, an internal ADU is not to exceed the same square footage of a first floor home, or 800 square feet. The attached is 800, and the detached is no more than 1,600 square feet, but that also includes the garage if there is a garage on site, and it's limited to 675 square foot footprint. And that's what I have for you this morning, or this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Nicole?
Hello, I'm Nicole Beckstrand with Yard Homes Minnesota. I'm just pulling up my presentation here, so just bear with me for a second as I move into my different mode of sharing here. Yeah, I don't want to accidentally shut off my screen. Can I get it into video mode? Does anybody know on Outlook? Oh, slideshow. There we go. There we go. All right. So thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this conference. Always very interesting to talk about ADUs, since basically my company is designed around ADUs. So my name is Nicole Beckstrand, and I am the founder of Yard Homes Minnesota with my partner, Jamie Stolpelstead. Jamie and I started our company in January of 2020. So really good time to start a new company right before a pandemic. Jamie and I both have a background in finance and housing, mine along the path of being a former banker that funded a lot of housing projects, and also being involved on the volunteer front and as a board member with Habitat for Humanity Minnesota, as well as the Family Housing Fund. And we came together as a result of a conference that was put on in October of 2019 by the former Commissioner of Housing for the state of Minnesota, named Mary Tingerthal. We were both on the planning committee for this conference. And this was a two-day session that was designed around bringing people outside the state of Minnesota that were doing innovative things in housing to Minnesota to talk about what they were doing, with the intention of learning and growing innovation in housing here in the state. So after that conference, Jamie and I continued to chat. And a few short months later, we decided that we were going to bring one of those innovative housing concepts to the state of Minnesota. And that housing concept was accessory dwelling units, which was a style of housing that we had some cities that have policies around them, but not very actively executed upon. And as well as the innovation in creating ADUs in a manufactured environment. So currently, Jamie and I consider ourselves a vertically integrated ADU company. So we do not only do the design of the product, but the servicing and the financing of our ADUs to both the market rate customer as well as to the nonprofit environment, from soup to nuts. So we have two styles of ADUs. We have a full volumetric. I'm actually sitting in one of our ADUs right now that is completely made in a manufactured environment. It takes about 1 day to put the unit together, from the beginning studying all the way to the installation of the appliances and quality check, and out the door. This unit that I'm sitting in now is approximately 540 square feet. It is fully licensed to be able to travel on state highways and roads in Minnesota. And so once it gets to the site, Yard Homes Minnesota is in charge of connecting it to the slab and connecting the utilities and handing over the keys. So this is our first entree into accessory dwelling units. And then our second product is what we refer to as a panelized version, which I have a unit of that right next to me here in my showroom. That unit is basically considered a kit of parts, and it comes much like a kit of Legos, but much, much bigger. Those units can be put together in about a week with a field crew of approximately 2 to 3 people. One of them needing to have some construction experience and the other two basically being somewhat of gophers. We developed, my business partner and I put our unit here together in our showroom together with one other individual that had a little bit of a construction background. And it took us a little over a day to get most of the shell up. That unit then is completed on the inside by us as well. So we implemented the modular or the kit of parts in the panelized version just because in Minnesota we encountered plenty of lots in the state where the lot was big enough to have a unit, but getting a 540 square foot building into somebody's backyard without, destroying a tree or accidentally taking down a power line or hitting the top of a house was very complicated. We were renting cranes that can be very expensive. And so we pivoted to having 2 types of models. So now we offer both models in the state. One of the reasons though we're in an ADU housing is because we believe that accessory dwelling units can be part of the answer to the housing shortage that we have. Our motto here at Yard Homes is more homes for more people in more places. And it's really designed around taking advantage of existing land that exists in cities and creating more density and putting more homes in place. And so this screen shows you just a little bit about the shortage of housing that we have in in Minnesota. In 2018, our governor did a study of all the shortage, and we face over a 300,000 unit shortage over the next 10 years of housing. I believe we've done some updates to that data in the last 2 years, and I think we're shortly gaining on that. The one thing we're not projecting forward though, and this is my personal opinion, there's no data or support behind it, is that I feel in the next 30 years, we'll actually have a much greater shortage of housing in Minnesota. Because when we think about or at least much greater shortage of affordable housing, because when we think about what is affordable housing now, it's the NOAA properties that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And if you think about the homes that were built in the 2000s or 2010s, and you consider them to be NOAA in the future, they're not built to the quality that homes were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I feel like those are homes that we're not going to be able to rely on as NOAA housing. They're going to have to be scrapped and rebuilt. So when you project this forward, I think the number that we need is actually much bigger than what the population increase is. And that's really the only metric that was taken into consideration when the governor's task force did their plan. It really didn't take into the need for replacement of housing that might not last as long as we would expect it to last. So we have a housing issue here. And at Yard Homes, we wanted to help it. We wanted to create accessory dwelling units for people that just wanted them in their backyards as additional living space, but we also wanted to create them as separate homes for people. So we actually put together a model called Model-Y-ELP, which is Yard Homes Enabling Housing Loan Program, that does exactly that. And I call it a partnership, or I use the word collaboration a lot because that's exactly what it is. And it takes everybody coming together in this program to actually make it work and make it function. So the partners to the program really obviously are, we have an ADU manufacturer. And why I say they're a partner is that manufacturer needs to really understand that we're trying to create a quality home and manage our costs, right? So we're trying to be very efficient and effective on the design, as well as the materials that we use in that program. In our model, we have a PRI investor and a financing partner. So the way this is established is that Jamie and I, and this screen kind of talks a little bit about the roles. Jamie and I, as Yard Homes, we sit in the middle of an organization to our left, let's say, that has land or has access to land that they would like to keep affordable. Jamie and I sign a 10-year lease for a portion of that land for $1 a year. And then we work with our manufacturer to develop a reasonably priced ADU that we bring in and we install on that piece of property. We own that ADU, Jamie and I, through Yard Homes, and we continue to provide the support and the maintenance for that ADU. Then we go out and we find a nonprofit partner that provides supportive services to individuals and that have access to vouchers. In our first scenario that we've been doing here in Minnesota, we've partnered with MACV, which is our Veterans Council here in Minnesota. And we picked that program because we felt like there was a doable number of homeless vets that we could try to achieve housing for, but also just based on discussions that I had had with the Council of Veterans, the leader of the Cultural Veterans, Neil, here in Minnesota, that the existing type of housing that is available to some homeless vets is just not working. And so we needed to think differently. So an ADU was a way of thinking differently about that. So we work with the landowner to ensure that we meet some of their requirements around issues that the tenant may have, making sure that it's an acceptable relationship. And then we move a vet into that ADU for a period of 10 years. Yard Homes collects the payment of the voucher, which in turn pays us back for the unit costs, as well as our financing costs that we're leveraging, as well as our profit. And then at the end of that 10-year period, we turn over ownership and basically deed that property to the landowner. So in our model, our beginning model, we sought out nonprofits that had land, and we're in the process of doing a number of installations of those units right now. We have a relationship with MACV where they actually had some existing homes that they owned in Minneapolis that were duplexes, and we're in the process of turning them into threeplexes by adding an additional ADU in the backyard, and then working with them on some of their own individuals to put into those units. But what happened really early on in this process that we didn't think would happen so quickly, we thought maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, we might actually stumble across a person that had a philanthropic mindset and said, hey, I'd love to house somebody in my backyard in an ADU. And that's a great way for me to get an ADU for myself down the road. We've now actually had 4 individuals between the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis that have stepped up to be a part of our program. And with all 4 of those individuals, we're in the process of getting their applications approved with the city for an ADU in their backyard. So we're very pleased with what we've seen progress with this program. Oops, I guess that was my last screen. Just some learnings along the way. We talk about accessory dwelling units being very costly, and they definitely can be. Stick-built accessory dwelling units on site can be extremely costly. We've really attempted to hold those costs down by working in a manufactured environment, by working with multiple manufacturers on costs and bringing down that cost. We've also worked very closely with our implementation teams, our installation teams, and train them on what is exactly necessary to install units in the field, so that we don't have any issues or unforeseen expenses. So it's been a very, I would say, elaborate process to get people to the point where we can deliver on our commitments. But we're really happy. We have about 24 ADUs that are in the process of deployment right now. Now, only about 12 of them are actually part of our Y-HELP program, but we still feel like that's a fairly good impact for our first year out of the gates. And actually, the PRI money that we raised, so we raised about $400,000 in PRI investment money that we then, rather than just going out and purchasing a couple ADUs and installing them somewhere, we took that money and leveraged it to a bank financing note of $1 million, so that we could basically do about 12 units. So about $1 million will get us between 10 and 12 units. So next fall, or come this fall, we'll actually be out fundraising again to raise that next, $400 to $500 or $500,000, so we can do this again and again and again. The nice part about our program is that it really is very exportable. As long as you have two nonprofit partners that are willing to work together, somebody that will bring you land and wants to maintain the affordability of that land, and then any sort of voucher program. So at this stage of the game, we are actually having conversations with other voucher programs around expanding. We're looking at some youth voucher programs. We're also looking at having a customized voucher program through the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority as well, and determining what that would look like. We've had discussions around how could we use this program with elderly individuals. So the state of Minnesota, Minneapolis and St. Paul have a lot of people that bought their homes 30, 40 years ago. And we would consider them maybe house poor or house burdened. They don't have enough money to move into any sort of supportive elderly aging in place or aging housing. But yet they need more services, or they need, a smaller space. So could we structure a program where we bring an ADU into their backyard, allow them to move into the ADU, and allow the home to then be rented out, thereby providing rental income for them, as well as paying for the accessory dwelling unit? And how could the city establish a program that supports that? So there's lots of great conversations going on. Our program is really modeled off of a couple of different programs in Minnesota that I've been involved in and I'm a fan of. And one of them is Stable Home, Stable Schools, which is a program that was started in Minneapolis 2 years ago, where funding has been given to families that have children in school that they would like to keep, that are homeless families with children in school. And how do you keep those kids in school? And one of those ways is to create stable housing for them. This program works on a lease. The Stable Home, Stable School program works on a rental lease and has identified property owners in the city that are willing to rent apartment units. But the very unique side of it is that there is a social contract that comes into play with these partnerships. So there's a social contract between the Minneapolis School District, the city, as well as the family, and the I think it's the YMCA that does some oversight. And that social contract talks about how the family will engage in school activities. They will participate in the child's educational progress with teachers. They have quarterly meetings where they get together to talk about the program. So our model also considers a social contract, in that when a homeowner decides to put an ADU in their backyard with our voucher program, we would like to see a social contract established between the owner and the renter, and see that and measure that success down the road. One of the messages I heard very distinctly back in 2019, when I started chatting with the Veterans Council here in Minnesota, is that the remaining homeless vets that we have are the ones that have failed in other forms of housing. These are individuals that have PTSD so bad that they can't exist in a 120 unit apartment complex where there's multiple people coming in and out. They can't exist in a unit that is very tiny with tiny windows. It reminds them too much of their barracks. it's too dark. There's all sorts of triggers that are created. Some of them just have PTSD issues related to going in an elevator and whatnot. So this form of housing that we feel is beautiful, and putting it right in somebody's backyard in the community with big, bright, open space and windows and a door that they can go right outside, in a home that they can have, you know, a support animal right there with them, is a model that we feel will be very impactful and create success stories. So we're really excited about it. We're just in the process of getting our installations going. We've done matchups of our veterans with the homes and some of the partners that are hosts that are stepping up to be our hosts. And we're very excited. We love to talk about it, and we want to keep doing more of it. So we'll be actively soliciting for, you know, donations to our PRI again come February, come fall, so that we can do this again next year. And maybe it's not 12, Y-HELPs next year. Maybe it's 24 Y-HELPs and 50 ADUs in total for yard homes. But I know I talk fast. I was only given a small period, and so I wanted to get as much information out to you. My email address is nicole@yardhomesmn. If you have any questions, I'll stay here on the presentation. If anybody wants to chat, I'm available.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you also, Stacy, for your wonderful presentations. We do have a couple of minutes for Q&A. And one of the questions is, and I think this is for Stacy, can you discuss the financing aspect of a home ADU combination and how that works?
Sure, and I wasn't, I noted that question as well. And so I think if it's from the homeowner perspective or the home buyer perspective, it was treated more as a single family home. And so it was being able to finance through a conventional mortgage. And we really didn't run into any real challenges, especially being able to show that it was going to be owner occupied as a land trust house. So from that perspective, as far as from the home buyer, we didn't run into any of those issues. And from a construction standpoint, we had investment from the city as well as Minnesota Housing, which is our state finance agency, the Hennepin County, and had, you know, some of our own private interim construction financing. So I don't know if it was just the fact that it was an attached ADU that we didn't run into a question around being served as a duplex or, you know, a detached unit. So fortunately for us, we didn't run into too many issues as we were trying this new concept for us.
If I, sorry, if I could chime in here too on that. My name's Nicole. So we actually created a special program here in Minnesota with a bank called Drake Bank in St. Paul around financing ADUs for individuals. So one of the things in Minnesota that's great about Minnesota is that when you add an ADU to your property, you don't get an increased value from a tax assessment standpoint. So your taxes don't go up, which is amazing, right? In some states, as soon as you add that ADU, your tax assessed value goes up and you've got more taxes to pay. That doesn't happen in Minnesota. But the problem with that then is that people don't have an increased value to their home to then go and get a bank loan to lend against, right? So they have a hard time putting an ADU because they already owe so much on their first mortgage. They don't have enough equity to build the ADU. So we've created this program with Drake Bank. Technically, because ADUs are a small loan, typically less than maybe $150,000, the bank technically does not have to comply with the appraisal standards. And so they can actually, rather than, you know, relying on a tax assessed value that doesn't give them that value, or an appraisal that they don't have comparables because nobody else has an ADU, the bank can actually determine a value for that ADU based upon their own analysis. So we've worked with Drake Bank. We've brought them out to our manufacturer so they can see how the units are built. They can see what goes into the units themselves, and they see the finished product. And they have basically determined a formula for determining the value based upon the sales price that we have for the unit. So so people can actually go in and finance one of our units through this bank. So they'll add that equity to whatever equity they have left in their home, and they'll allow a second mortgage against that. So there's some ways of thinking creatively. I know that that's newer in the marketplace, but I'm happy to chat with anybody that knows a banker that wants to think big and create a product like that in some other states as well.
And Sherry, I just wanted to add, there was I think it was Stephanie's question as well about how the ownership works. For us, our homeowner, the land trust homeowner, owns the whole structure. We own the land, of course, just through the land trust model, but they are in ownership of the ADU as well as the main, just because it's a single structure in our case of the 4 that we did.
And we have 1 more minute. And the question is, what are the major improvements? What major innovation and improvements have you implemented or seen recently that can bring down the costs of ADUs?
So I think one thing that we try to focus on when we're talking with people, whether it's a market rate customer or it's what I would consider a affordable housing purchaser, is that try not to change the shape or the design externally of the ADU, because when we go back to our manufacturer, if we keep a standard size of 15 by 34 is a standard size for us, and we don't change that layout, we can do some volume pricing with them. We can, we can fit into their production cycles easier because they don't have to change their machinery and that kind of stuff. You can customize anything on the outside. You can change the color of the shingles. You can change the color of the siding. You can change the paint and all that stuff. But if you can keep the structural piece of the ADU the same, you can help take advantage of some economy of scale. And as much as you can do here in Minnesota in the factory, because anything coming out of the factory is automatically approved by the state of Minnesota and signed off on from a licensing standpoint. So really, the fewer hoops you have to jump through with the city, you can keep some of that licensing cost down. So our units go through, 1 inspection before they go out the door. It's a state inspector that's on site there at the production facility. And then the only other inspections they get is the utility hookup and site lay when we get them in the field. So those are just a couple of advantages that we've kind of capitalized on, when I would say, in our process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Stacy and Nicole, for your expertise and enlightening us on what's going on in Minnesota and those innovative programs. Now we're going to go to our break, and all of the attendees will have the option of going to our 2 concurrent sessions, Real Estate Market Roundtable or Deep Dive ADU Valuation and Underwriting. But we'll see you back at 2:15. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Take care.